Joining us from Washington on both sides of the debate is Steve Everley, team lead on Energy in Depth, and Emily Wurth, Water Program Director at Food and Water Watch. Thank you so much for joining us early this morning. Emily, I want to kick things off with you. Energy independence, that sounds great, and so does the millions of jobs as a result of this surge. But are we forgetting about the environmental costs?
Yes, I mean, the oil and gas industry has taken a play from the tobacco industry's playbook, and they have spent millions of dollars in advertising to lead the American people to believe that that fracking for every last drop of oil and gas in the United States will benefit the economy. But what we're seeing is not only environmental effects on both the water quality and air quality of communities across the country, but we're also seeing public health effects. And in effect, this rapid expansion of fossil fuel development is a large uncontrolled public health experiment of people across the country. And really, at the end of the day, the industry plans to export this gas overseas. And so that makes it clear that this is not about U.S. energy independence. And the best way to lead to U.S. energy independence is to transition to renewable and sustainable sources of energy.
Emily, what exactly is the impact on water?
Well, what we're seeing is this industry has a terrible track record when it comes to accidents, leaks, and spills. So there have been problems with water contamination from leaks and explosions from the drilling process, but also drilling wells according to the industry's own documents, approximately 6% of wells fail immediately. The casing in the well fails immediately. And what we're seeing from that, and over time that number increases up to as much as 50% over 30 years. And so what we're seeing is the gas, methane, migrating into drinking water supplies in the groundwater supplies of communities near these sites, some to levels that are explosive and are actually hazards because homes and wells could explode, which have happened.
Steve, want to bring you in. How do you respond to those claims?
Well, it's kind of a question of where to start. The most recent, or the latest claim there about 50% failure rates, this was looking at data for deepwater Gulf of Mexico wells. A deepwater Gulf of Mexico well is not the same as an onshore shale well. And what we see consistently is sort of this, raised doubt, use these sort of anecdotal examples to suggest that a clear safety record, which is based on empirical data, somehow isn't such. You mentioned, a lot of jobs coming back. There's a manufacturing renaissance going on in the United States. And frankly, there are environmental benefits to shale gas development, including cleaner air. The EPA has noted that in the mid-Atlantic region alone, toxic air emissions have gone down about 14%, owing in no small part to natural gas use. Carbon dioxide emissions are at a 20-year low, again, thanks in no small part to natural gas development, affordable natural gas supplies, which is being unlocked by hydraulic fracturing. And the EPA has even said that, one of the critics' talking points on this in terms of emissions is methane leaks. The EPA's data on this has shown that since 1990, natural gas production has absolutely skyrocketed, and yet methane emissions from natural gas systems have gone down. So what we see across the board is actually responsible development, and frankly, state regulations are constantly being updated to address some of these other public concerns to make sure we're managing these risks even more effectively.
Emily, let me bring you back in. How do you respond to Steve's points that effectively opponents are not reading the data points correctly?
Well, I think the important thing for the American people to know is that the oil and gas industry is exempt from many of the landmark environmental regulations, including the Safe Drinking Water Act, the provisions of the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Water Act. And Steve pointed to state regulators, and what we've seen at the state level is this revolving door between state regulators and the oil and gas industry, where we, in essence, have the fox guarding the hen house. And the problem is that because of all these exemptions, the data is not there for communities to know what chemicals are they being exposed to. And as well as many of the other air pollutants and issues that we should understand to fully understand. I mean, the Government Accountability Office put out a report that said that there are inherent public health and environmental problems with oil and gas development, and that we don't understand the cumulative effects because studies have not been done. And so we need comprehensive studies to look at what the cumulative health effects are. And we know that all climate scientists tell us that we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and that we can't drill for every last drop of oil and gas and expect to avert catastrophic climate change.
Steve, you make the point that shale gas emissions may not be worse than those of coal, but yet they're pretty dangerous overall. I mean, how can you simply downplay that point?
Well, look, all energy development entails some sort of risk. The question is, what's the trade-off? You know, what are we replacing, and how are we moving forward? You know, we can all sit around and say that, you know, oh, renewables and efficiency will solve all of our problems. Well, what's the cost of that? What's the feasibility of that? People have looked into these kinds of things, and, you know, respectable climate scientists, environmental groups, experts across the board, people in the Obama administration have consistently pointed to natural gas as either a bridge fuel or as something that will lead us toward the low carbon economy. You know, again, we can look at these, you know, sort of marginalized examples in these other studies and make these kinds of claims and do some arm waving about the tobacco industry, whatever that's about. But when you actually get into the hard data and the hard evidence on this, we're managing risks, and when you look at shale gas development across the board, this is a net plus not only for our economy but for our environment. It's just a fact.
Lee, come back in.
I don't think that the people who have been exposed to the explosions and the fires and the pipeline spills would agree that this is manageable risk. This is an inherently risky practice. There's data from across the country about all of the violations to the existing state regulations, which are inadequate. And this is something that needs to be banned.
Unfortunately, this is all we have time for. Steve, go ahead and respond. I think we've got another minute or so.
Sorry, I lost my mic there.
If the goal is risk-free energy, then we're not going to have any energy at all. I mean, the fact of the matter is, no matter what kind of energy you develop, there are certain risks with it. Whether it's transporting it, whether it's actually producing it, everything has risks. If we're talking about renewables, we're talking about mining rare earth materials in China. So there are risks for all of these things, but there are also benefits for all of these energy sources. And so again, it comes down to how do we manage risks and what are the trade-offs. If we want to have a grown-up conversation about energy, we'll come to the realization that shale gas is a net positive for North America, for the economy, and for the environment.
Steve, thank you so much for that. Steve Everley, team lead at Energy in Depth, and Emily Wurth, Water Program Director at Food and Water Watch. So a pretty heated debate there. Of course, many benefits, many costs to that side of the story. We've been asking viewers to weigh in on the debate. Do fracking